How did we get here? Well, on this historic date, on December 1st, 1955, Mrs. Rosa Parks sat down so that people of color and all people who love democracy and justice and the oneness of all humanity could stand up. Something that Plessy did back on June 7th, 1892, on a train, where he sat down in the white-only section for the same purposes. And by the way, read that case. He was 7/8 white and 1/8 African blood, but it was not discernible, according to the Supreme Court. Okay? Hey, how did we get here? Read Reverend Dr. Martin King Jr.'s speech from March 25th, 1965. Civil rights speech and voting rights speech, right? He was lifting up the fighting for the Voting Rights Act. And he said in that speech in the 19th century that black men and white men voted together in the 19th century in fusion coalitions, huh? Vote economics, not color of skin. Black men, newly freed slaves, right? What's slavery? Work night and day and night, you paid zero, right? Who gets hurt by that? White citizens. Why? Because the slaves are doing all the work. They're the masons, they're the blacksmiths, they're the carpenters, they're the seamstress. They do all the work, okay? For free, which puts white people out of jobs. That's why we need reparations for our white Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, and of course, Native Americans. But I digress. So, and how did, by the way, what happened to that voting? They were able to pass on March 1st, 1875, the Civil Rights Act of 1875. You know what it said? Treat everybody equally. Supreme Court in the Civil Rights case of 1883 said, forget about it. You don't have to do that, right? And then almost takes 100 years to get the bill again, right? Civil Rights Bill, right? Civil Rights Act of 1964. Signed on what? July 2nd, 1964? How do we get here? We got here through people sacrificing. And notice here that they cut the time for voting. Right back in 2 years ago is what, January 5th, 2021, for the runoff? And now they made it what, December 6th? They cut the time purposely. And now you can't give out water and other things too, right? Racist things that were done to curtail voting. But it's been going on for a long, long, long time.
Now, that can't come fast enough because it seems each and every day brings some new piece of news demonstrating just what a terrible candidate Mr. Walker is. Tonight, former President Barack Obama was in Georgia at a rally for Warnock, and man, it was not pretty for Herschel Walker.
Since the last time I was here, Mr. Walker has been talking about issues that are of great importance to the people of Georgia. Like whether it's better to be a vampire or a werewolf. This is a debate that I must confess I once had myself. When I was 7. Then I grew up. In case you're wondering, by the way, Mr. Walker decided he wanted to be a werewolf. Which is great. As far as I'm concerned, he can be anything he wants to be, except for a United States Senator. Since the last time I was here, apparently he also claimed that he used to let me beat him at basketball. But then he admitted that we've never actually met. So I guess this was more of an imaginary whooping that I laid on him. Now, listen, this would be funny if he weren't running for Senate.
That's well said. I've had that very same thought many times. It's the reality of the situation. It's not only Democrats who understand this. Listen to the story told by the current Republican Lieutenant Governor of Georgia yesterday.
I showed up to vote this morning. I was one of those folks who got in line and spent about an hour waiting. And, it was the most disappointing ballot I've ever stared at in my entire life since I started voting. I had two candidates that I just couldn't find anything that made sense for me to put my vote behind. And so I walked out of that ballot box showing up to vote, but not voting for either one of them.
It's not so surprising a story, given that throughout this campaign, nearly every day there seems to have brought a new bombshell about Herschel Walker. CNN reported that Walker claimed his Texas home as his principal residence as recently as this year. The Daily Beast revealed that the place Walker's so-called home in Georgia was rented out as recently as last year. And then today, another explosive report by the Daily Beast, a former longtime girlfriend coming forward with a harrowing and detailed account of their 5-year relationship, including a, quote, violent episode with the football star, who she believes is unstable, has little to no control over his mental state when he is not in treatment. Herschel Walker just blanket denies every one of those stories, but notably never really substantively disputes facts. Roger Sollenberger is a political reporter for the Daily Beast who broke that story along with numerous other stories about Herschel Walker during his campaign. Hillary Hawley is a Georgia political organizer, currently executive director of Care in Action, which is mobilizing voters in the runoff, and both join me now. Hillary, let me start with you about that mobilization. We've seen huge early voting numbers, record-setting early numbers. But I think there's this general assumption, well, big turnout, good for Democrats. But this was interesting from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The first full day of early voting in all of Georgia's 159 counties. Turnout was particularly robust in lightly populated rural counties that Walker carried in the midterm. Among the counties that backed U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock, 478,000 people had voted through Tuesday. In counties that supported Walker, 355,000 ballots have been cast. It's always hard to draw conclusions, but what is your sense about the level of engagement, particularly because this race won't decide Senate control as some thought it might?
Yes, well, first, thank you so much for having me this evening. I will say this, over the weekend, so this past weekend, which we had to fight so hard to get, right? The Republicans tried to ban Saturday voting, and because of the Mark Elias lawsuit, we were able to get Saturday voting. Over that time, we had over 70,000 people vote. And what we have seen over the past week is we've seen hundreds of thousands. So we're averaging over 250,000 voters every single day. And the reason because of that is we have canvassers, so such as Care in Action, Black Voters Matter, the labor organization Unite Here. We collectively are knocking over 200,000 doors a day. We have knocked over 3 million doors so far. And so when I'm looking at the turnout, Chris, I'm looking at our voters who are showing up. And as you just saw, we have some Republican voters who are voting for Warnock.
That's right.
And
yes.
so we're feeling great on the ground.
Yeah, that last point is important, I think, because one of the things we saw when the electorate as a whole in that midterm election was slightly more Republican identified than the 2020 electorate that showed up that in which Biden carried the state. So there were Republicans voting for Warnock. We know that. The math wouldn't have scanned otherwise. Roger, I was struck by your story today because it seems like in the last few days, I remember when Donald Trump kind of, picked Herschel Walker as, he clearly wanted him to run for Senate. And there was a whole bunch of concerns from Georgia Republican politicos who were like, this is a bad idea. Here's why. He doesn't live in Georgia. Here's the picture of his house in Texas. Also, he's got this really, really rocky past. And, he pointed a gun at an ex and all that. And it's like somehow every day it's like a news story that's exactly the things that Georgia Republicans said were the reason that he wouldn't be a good candidate.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of those things revolve around women, tellingly. And the stories that I've broken do tend to revolve around the women and his family, the secret children, the constant lying, the abortion that he paid for. And then now this latest story with a woman coming forward using her name very bravely to detail a violent episode with him. But more than that, 5 years of an intimate relationship with him, trying to help him manage his dissociative identity disorder, which also everybody knew that he had coming into it. And I think the most remarkable thing out of all of this to me is, after Roe v. Wade was overturned and a bunch of Republicans started trying to shade sort of towards the the center, trying to come off as a little bit more moderate. Herschel Walker put his foot on the gas and was, just outspoken about being anti-abortion candidate, right? And then the whole time he's known that this was there in his past, and he's continued with it.
One more follow-up to you, Roger. It's striking the kind of the woman that you interviewed today. He's very public, obviously, about his struggles with mental health, and basically his story is, I went through some really tough times. I found God. I turned my life around. I'm a different person now, and I'm ready to serve as your senator. And here she's coming forward, basically to say, I don't think that's true. That's kind of the top line of what she says to you.
Yeah, I think she's saying how serious the problem is with him. And he acknowledges that it's serious as well, but he also points to, the book and to Christianity as, sort of an excuse, I guess, or a reason that, I've overcome these things, and I deserve forgiveness. And, everybody does deserve forgiveness. That's true. But I think it's a little bit more complicated. The year after the book was published, he had a child out of wedlock, and then a few months later paid a woman to have an abortion while he was dating a woman who is now his wife and several other women that I've spoken with. It was not an inflection point. It doesn't seem, if you're judging, behavior that way. And I think that has gone lost. A lot of people are very willing to forgive him and to offer him redemption. But, by his own telling and his own actions, I'm not, exactly sure where that, born again point actually begins.
In the final 30 seconds here, Hillary, it seemed like Raphael Warnock was shying away from some of these more sort of like, this guy is unfit to be your senator critiques before, less so now. That does seem like a huge part of the closing argument here.
Listen, Georgia voters want to know how Democrats can improve their lives. And they have watched Warnock show up for them in ways that we just couldn't imagine before 2020. And so voters are eager to get to the polls again. They know who Raphael Warnock is. They know that they do not want Walker to represent them. And so we're going to show up and we're going to turn out. We're helping them mitigate or find ways to get around the voter suppression and helping them figure out when and where to vote. And if we do that, Chris, we're going to win. We're feeling great.
We will be keeping our eyes on it. Roger Sollenberger, Hillary Hawley, thank you both. That is All In on this Thursday night. Alex Wagner Tonight starts right now.
Notice how she mentioned getting around voter suppression. That's major, right? Major. Thank you for being on my YouTube channel, my TikTok channel, my Instagram page, One Race, Human Race, All Human, on this historic day, December 1st, 1955, where Mrs. Rosa Parks sat down so those who love democracy and justice and the oneness of all humanity could stand up. God bless you. God keep you on this Thursday, December 1st, 2022. God bless you.